Here.
Right. Okay, picking back up this conversation for 15 minutes to figure out what next steps are for ourselves. And then we are going to talk about compacts completely, not make up compacts for Representative Sims, but in fact, multi-state compacts for healthcare. Abby, do you want to join us again? Nope, this is not a sign for the week ahead. Okay. So I have a list of witnesses that we're interested in talking to. We have decision points before us about how properties actually get designated, the mechanics of designation. And then are there other outstanding questions? If we were voting on this tomorrow. We're definitely not. I'm just saying, like, if that's what was happening, what would need to happen for you in order to do something like that? Because I know that lots of people on this committee like had been wanting a bill like this. I did not just sort of make it up out of, you know, thin air.
I don't know. I think just general simplification. It just seems really complicated right now.
Okay.
Because as I think it was Catherine asked, Carolyn said about PVR had its own categories. There are 15 in there. And I would be interested to know from Director Remick how that has worked for them, because I'm sort of simpler is better. You know, 8 is getting close to difficult and daunting.
I think kind of building off of Representative Representative Anthony's observations, as I think about theoretically sending a town employee out into the world to do this work, I feel nervous about how that's going to go for them. But I think we've got some good solutions for that, hopefully.
Do you have other outstanding things on your list from having to listen to us for the last few months?
I did actually, so for the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel, there was a question last week, I think it was from 2 times ago, that I was testifying about farm buildings, and I just wanted to clarify that, but I don't want to derail the conversation too much, just about how that works under current use. It was sort of an outstanding question. Okay, so there was a change recently that added farm buildings, so that's all farm buildings and other farm improvements actively used by a farmer as part of a farming operation, owned by a farmer or leased to a farmer under a written lease for a term of 3 years or more, and it's on land that's enrolled in current use. So again, this is just current use, and that wouldn't, this bill as it's drafted, the draft wouldn't impact farm buildings in any way. And farm buildings do include up to $100,000 of value of a farm facility, a minimum of 70% of which are produced on the farm. And farm buildings excludes dwellings, including dwellings for farm employees. So just, there had been that question about, does this in any way impact farm buildings? There was that recent change, but that's really within current use, and this wouldn't impact that in any way. So those under these categories, farm buildings would, what the categories, would certainly not fall into the open land and structures definition. I think the question had arisen because previously the draft had said any area of land, including forest land or ag land. But then now that no buildings would be in this category of open land and structures, that's sort of a non-issue.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And then another sort of lingering piece that I want to make sure gets resolved. I received an email about it, and then, which I haven't read fully yet. It was sometime over the weekend that it came in. I think Representative Anthony, you brought this up, that how to sort of extend this to municipalities beyond the education property tax, that this these categories would also be available for municipalities to use. Because if something like the land value proposals were going to move, they'd be moving on the municipal side, not on the statewide education property tax side. And so they would want these categories for that.
If I may, that's part of what I also had in the back of my mind when I seconded the invitation or suggested invitation of Director Remick, because she would be able to say, okay, such a categorization might be more acceptable because it might be useful for in the municipal context. And she could testify to that. I don't want to speculate.
And you have a few other, I think, like just sort of language tweaks that you were gonna make or not?
I think last week I pointed out I had changed some of the domicile language just to clarify. There was concern about linking it to the landlord certificate. So rather than using that cross-reference, it just has the language here. When looking at rental housing and the seasonal dwelling and non-seasonal secondary dwelling definitions, now it just looks at those exclude dwellings where someone is actually living in them as their domicile. So there were just sort of those technical changes, so that in case the landlord certificate is ever amended, that would then require an amendment here.
Okay.
But the effect is the same. And then in the last two sections, I think I have walked through these. Sorry, I don't recall if I made it through the tax bill changes. They just require that a tax bill also has categories in addition to classification. And then the effective date is fairly soon. So it would be applying to the next property tax year, which would impact the filing season in 2024. Filing season, I'm thinking property tax credit. It would impact grand lists that are being lodged in 2024.
Okay.
That's a fairly quick turnaround for if it is on towns or the state to create these new categories and administer them. So that could also be changed if we chose to.
Yeah, it's probably slightly too soon. Yeah.
I just had ringing in my my head, because I was rereading some of the testimony that was submitted, that Sorger mailed out to us, and the urging on one of the testifiers to move the dates. And if we move the dates, it may be that this is not practically implementable in 24. If we come back to January, which was his urging, because of the compression between fixing the assessment and lodging the grand list. He said really better start in January rather than April. And it makes this even more daunting.
Yes, and that's the dates that are in there are really
Yeah.
placeholders, so absolutely up to your discretion to change any of those.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So would you like me to, I can make, the one change I noted was making sure that if they are being different portions based on square footage, that it's at any point during the taxable year. Removing the open land and structures from the list of ordered categories, but otherwise it sounds like you don't have clear.
No, I think from there, we just need to give some thought to how this could be simpler, which is, I think, a good question. And then figuring out who will make those decisions. And I think those are going to be questions that we start with PVR on. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
So in a couple minutes, we're going to talk about compacts. We have 4 bills that are going to come to us about this in the next. We have 3 now? We have 3 now. We're going to get at least one more. They're all structurally identical. They have different professions involved in them. They're all going to result, I don't know if folks remember when we heard testimony from OPR about this, but they're all going to result in less revenues. And they're sort of all broadly considered very good policy for workforce, especially for military spouses, but generally just for sort of expanding and making our workforce available. And so the first one we'll probably spend a lot more time on so we can all get our head around what a compact is. But after that, it's going to be, we've sort of acknowledged that this is a thing that we understand and we work with, and we're going to move through the other three much faster, sort of trusting the healthcare committee. Yeah,
As appropriate for how you want to handle us moving forward.
yeah.
At some point, we're gonna need, I think, to talk about a different funding model for, okay, you got it.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's gonna get less and less functional as compacts and other kinds of things come up, you know?
And they're already in a maybe not super functional space.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And my understanding is that OPR is planning to come to us with a proposal or a few proposals of some sort as they sort of work through that.
Your